When a decorated Army general with 30 years of service gets slapped by a racist cop during a simple traffic stop, no one expects what happens next. 4 minutes after the slap, everything changes. General Marcus Webb's daughter captures the whole incident on video, and it spreads like wildfire. What begins as one terrible moment quickly exposes a corrupt police department that has been targeting minorities for years. But that's just the beginning. As General Webb and his family fight for justice, they uncover something far more dangerous than they ever imagined. A secret network with evil plans that could harm thousands of innocent people. This is the story of how one man's dignity in the face of injustice started an empire crumbling, and how standing up against a single wrong can sometimes prevent 1,000 others. General Marcus Webb adjusted his tie in the rearview mirror. Today was special. His daughter Zara had just graduated college with honors. Pride swelled in his chest as he glanced at her in the passenger seat, still wearing her cap and tassel. "Dad, you're smiling again," Zara said, looking up from her phone. "Can't help it. Not every day my little girl graduates top of her class." General Webb's deep voice was warm with emotion. 30 years in the Army had given him a commanding presence, but today he was just a proud father. The spring sunshine made the small town of Pinewood look pretty as they drove through. They had taken the scenic route home from the university, wanting to stretch out the happy day. "Mom's going to freak when she sees all these pictures," Zara laughed, scrolling through her phone. "I got one of you wiping your eyes during my speech." "I had something in my eye," Webb protested with a smile. The flash of red and blue lights in his mirror cut their laughter short. "Were you speeding, Dad?" Zara frowned. Webb checked his speedometer. "No, I was going exactly the limit." He pulled over carefully, putting on his turn signal and stopping completely. Years of military training had taught him to stay calm in all situations. He watched in his side mirror as 2 officers approached. One was tall and thin with a hard face. The other was shorter with red hair. Neither was smiling. "License and registration," the tall officer said, not bothering with a greeting. His nameplate read, "Done." "Good afternoon, officer," Webb said politely. "May I ask why I was pulled over?" Officer Dunn's face tightened. "You were swerving. License and registration now." "I wasn't swerving, sir. Don't tell me what you were or weren't doing," Dunn snapped. "ID, now," Webb nodded slowly. "My registration is in the glove compartment. My wallet is in my inside jacket pocket. I'm going to reach for it now, okay?" The second officer, whose nameplate read Rawlins, stayed silent, hand resting on his belt. "Dad," Zara whispered, her voice tight with worry. "It's okay, sweetheart," Webb said calmly. He reached slowly for his inside pocket. "What did you say?" Officer Dunn demanded, suddenly leaning closer to the window. "I was just telling my daughter." Without warning, Officer Dunn grabbed Webb's arm. "Get out of the car." "Sir, I was just reaching for my ID as requested." "Get out now!" Dunn shouted, yanking at Webb's arm. Webb remained calm. "Officer, there's no need for this. I'm General Marcus Webb, United States Army. My military ID is right here." The slap came out of nowhere. Officer Dunn's hand connected with Webb's face, with a crack that seemed to echo through the quiet street. Zara screamed. "Don't you lie to me, boy," Dunn hissed, using a word that hung in the air like poison. "No one driving through here is a general anything." Webb's cheek stung, but his expression remained dignified. 30 years defending his country, and now this. "Dad!" Zara cried, already tapping frantically on her phone. "I'm recording this," Officer Rawlins shifted uncomfortably. "Dunn, maybe we should—" "Shut up, Rawlins," Dunn barked. He reached in and unlocked Webb's door, dragging him out with unnecessary force. "Hands on the car," Webb complied, placing his hands on the hood. "Officer, I'd like to speak with your supervisor." "Oh, you'll get to talk to lots of people," Dunn sneered, kicking Webb's feet wider apart. "After we search this fancy car of yours." In the passenger seat, Zara was holding her phone up, tears streaming down her face. "I'm live streaming this right now. Everybody can see what you're doing." "Put that phone down," Dunn shouted. "No," Zara yelled back. "The whole world is watching you right now." Officer Rawlins looked at the phone, then at General Webb's face, and something in his expression changed. "Dunn, look at his jacket," Rawlins said quietly. For the first time, Officer Dunn seemed to notice Webb's military dress uniform, complete with rows of medals and stars indicating his rank. "Could be a costume," Dunn said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "My ID is in my inside pocket," Webb repeated calmly. "I was reaching for it when you struck me." Dunn roughly patted Webb down and pulled out his wallet. He flipped it open to reveal military identification, clearly showing General Marcus Webb, with an impressive list of security clearances. "This could be fake," Dunn muttered, but his face had paled. "Call it in," Rawlins suggested, looking increasingly nervous. Inside the car, Zara was talking rapidly to her phone. "Yes, they just slapped my father, General Marcus Webb. We're on Maple Street in Pinewood. They pulled us over for no reason. Dad was coming back from my graduation." Officer Dunn reached for his radio, stepping away from Webb. Rawlins moved closer. "Sir, this is a mistake," Rawlins said quietly. "Yes, it is," Webb agreed, his dignity intact despite the handcuffs and the red mark spreading across his face. The radio on Officer Dunn's shoulder suddenly crackled to life. "All units in the vicinity of Maple Street, report to station immediately." "Dunn, Rawlins, do you copy?" Dunn grabbed his radio. "This is Dunn. We're in the middle of a traffic stop. Abort immediately," the voice commanded. "Is the subject a General Webb?" Dunn's face went from pale to ashen. "Yes, but release him now. The station is getting flooded with calls. There's video all over the internet already. The mayor is on the other line. The Pentagon is calling." It had been exactly 4 minutes since the slap. Rawlins quickly moved to remove Webb's handcuffs. "Sir, I deeply apologize for this misunderstanding." Webb rubbed his wrists, his expression unreadable. "This was not a misunderstanding, Officer Rawlins. This was something else entirely." Officer Dunn was frantically speaking into his radio, his face contorted with panic. Crowds were beginning to gather on both sides of the street, phones out, filming everything. Webb straightened his uniform jacket with dignity. "My daughter and I will be on our way now. I suggest you prepare yourselves. This day is far from over." As if on cue, more police cars screeched to a halt nearby. The police chief himself jumped out, his face a mask of horror as he rushed toward them. Officer Dunn looked like a man watching his world collapse around him. In a way, it was. What he didn't know yet was that this was just the beginning. Puerbihiu walked calmly back to his car, helping Zara out as she continued live streaming. "Dad, are you okay?" she whispered, hand trembling as she touched his reddened cheek. "I'm fine," he assured her. Then, looking at the growing crowd, the panicking officers, and the police chief running toward them, he added, "But they won't be." The empire built on badges and bullying had just met its match, and in exactly 4 minutes, it had begun to crumble. General. Webb drove home in silence, one hand occasionally touching his cheek, where Officer Dunn had slapped him. Beside him, Zara was still on her phone, her voice tight with emotion as she spoke to her mother. "We'll be home in 10 minutes, Mom." "Yes, he's okay. The video's already got over 1 million views." "I know." Webb glanced at his daughter. In the span of an hour, her graduation day had turned into something entirely different. He felt a pang of regret that her celebration had been overshadowed. "Dad?" Zara put her hand on his arm. "Are you really okay?" Webb nodded. "I've faced worse. In 3 combat tours. This is different," Zara said quietly. Webb didn't answer because she was right. Facing an enemy abroad was nothing like facing hatred at home. The Webb family home sat on a quiet street just outside of town. It was a handsome 2-story house, with a neatly trimmed lawn and an American flag flying from the porch. As Webb pulled into the driveway, he saw his wife Nadine waiting at the door, her face etched with worry. Their son Elijah stood beside her, practically bouncing with nervous energy. Nadine rushed down the steps the moment the car stopped. She was still wearing her court attire. As a civil rights attorney, she'd left work early when Zara called. "Marcus!" She wrapped her arms around him, then pulled back to examine his face. The red mark from Dunn's slap was already turning into a bruise. "I'm going to destroy them," she whispered, her lawyer's mind already building a case. Elijah, 17 and tall like his father, was less restrained. "This is messed up. I saw the video. Those cops need to pay." "Let's go inside," Webb said firmly. The neighbors were starting to peek out their windows. In the living room, the family gathered around Zara's laptop. The video of the incident had been viewed 5 million times in under 2 hours. News channels were already running the story. "They're calling you," Nadine said, handing Webb his buzzing phone. The screen showed a Washington, D.C. number. Webb took the call in his study while the rest of the family stayed in the living room, planning their next moves. "Your face is trending." "Dad," Zara said when Webb returned, "there are hashtags. Hard justice for General. Hard Pinewood shame. People are organizing protests at the police station." "Good," Elijah said fiercely. "I want to go. Those racist cops need to see us standing up to them." Nadine sat with legal pads spread around her. "I've already contacted the ACLU. This is a clear case of racial profiling and police brutality. We can file for damages, push for the officers' termination, demand department-wide retraining." Webb sat quietly in his armchair, watching his family. Nadine, brilliant and fierce, ready to fight in court. Zara, using her social media skills to rally public support. Elijah, young and angry, wanting immediate justice. "What did Washington say?" Nadine finally asked, noticing his silence. "They're concerned," Webb replied. "The Pentagon doesn't appreciate seeing one of their generals handcuffed on the side of the road." "They should be concerned," Elijah burst out. "You've given your whole life to this country, and this is how you get treated?" "Elijah," Webb began. "No, Dad. You always say, wait, be patient, work within the system. But the system is broken." Webb looked at his son, seeing the pain behind his anger. "You're right," he said simply. The admission stunned the room into silence. "You're right," Webb repeated. "The system is broken, but we have an opportunity here." "What are you thinking?" Nadine asked, recognizing the look in her husband's eyes. It was the same expression he wore when planning military operations. "This isn't just about me," Webb explained. "What happened today happens to people without my rank, without cameras recording, every single day. People without a voice." He stood up and looked at each family member. "Nadine, we'll need your legal expertise. Zara, keep that video spreading. Elijah, channel that anger into organizing your friends, but peacefully." "What are you going to do, Dad?" Zara asked. Webb walked to the window and looked out at the American flag flying on their porch. I made a call to an old friend in Washington, someone who owes me a favor. The Department of Justice will be taking a special interest in the Pinewood Police Department. How special? Nadine asked, a slow smile spreading across her face. Let's just say Chief Blackwood's empire is about to get a very thorough inspection, Webb replied. And what I suspect they'll find goes far beyond one racist officer. The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. Webb peered through the peephole to see news cameras and reporters gathered on their front lawn. It begins, he said, turning back to his family. Are we ready? Nadine stood and straightened her jacket. We've been ready our whole lives for this fight. Zara closed her laptop. The world is watching now. Elijah stepped forward, standing tall like his father. Let's make it count. Together, the Webb family prepared to face the cameras. What had started with a slap was now something much bigger. It was about to become a reckoning. Chief Warren Blackwood slammed his fist on the desk so hard that his coffee mug jumped and spilled. "What were you thinking?" he roared at Officers Dunn and Rawlins, who stood stiffly before him. The blinds in his office were closed, but they couldn't block out the sound of protesters gathering outside the Pinewood Police Department. "Sir, we had no way of knowing," Officer Dunn began. "No way of knowing what?" Chief Blackwood cut him off. "That you shouldn't slap a man in uniform? That you shouldn't use racial slurs on camera? That the man you decided to harass was a 3-star general?" Officer Rawlins stared at the floor. Officer Dunn's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. "The TO stop was justified," Dunn insisted. "His car was swerving." "Was it?" Chief Blackwood leaned forward. "Because the dash cam footage doesn't show any swerving. What it does show is you pulling over an expensive car with a black driver for no apparent reason." The phone on his desk rang for what seemed like the 100th time. Blackwood ignored it. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he continued. "The mayor is threatening to fire me. The governor called personally. And now I hear the Pentagon is involved." Officer Rawlins finally spoke up. "Sir, what happens now?" Chief Blackwood ran a hand over his face. He was a big man with 25 years on the force. He'd built the Pinewood Police Department into what it was today. His own little empire where he made the rules. "Now," he said in a calmer voice, "we do what we always do. We handle it." An hour earlier, before Dunn and Rawlins had returned to the station, Chief Blackwood had called an emergency meeting with his most trusted officers in the basement records room. "Listen up," he'd told the 5 officers gathered around him. "We've got a situation. Dunn and Rawlins messed up big time, and we need to clean house before this gets worse." Lieutenant Parker, Blackwood's right-hand man for years, nodded. "What do you need, Chief?" "Pull all the traffic stop records from the last 3 years. Anything that might show a pattern, you understand? Separate them into different files. Make sure the numbers look balanced." "We talking about the usual procedure?" Sergeant Miller asked, a 20-year veteran who knew exactly what the usual procedure meant. Blackwood nodded. "And check Dunn's personnel file. Clean up any complaints. Make it look like he's had nothing but glowing reviews." Officer Jenkins, a younger cop who had only been with the department for 2 years, shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, isn't that what, Jenkins?" Blackwood challenged, fixing him with a hard stare. "Nothing, sir," Jenkins mumbled, looking away. "Good," Blackwood continued. "This isn't the first storm we've weathered, and it won't be the last. We look after our own here." Now, facing Dunn and Rawlins in his office, Blackwood was calculating his next move. The situation was worse than usual, but the playbook remained the same. Deny, deflect, and if necessary, destroy evidence. "Here's what's going to happen," he told them. "Dunn, you're suspended with pay pending an internal investigation. Rollins, you're on desk duty. We'll release a statement saying we take these allegations seriously and are conducting a thorough review." "Suspended?" Dunn protested. "For doing my job?" Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "For getting caught, you idiot. If that girl hadn't been filming, this would be handled like every other time." A memory flashed through Blackwood's mind. 3 years earlier, a black teenager had accused Officer Dunn of excessive force during an arrest. There had been no video then. Blackwood had personally led the investigation that cleared Dunn of all wrongdoing. The teenager's family had moved away soon after, following a series of traffic tickets and code violations that had mysteriously piled up at their house. That was how things worked in Pinewood. That was how Blackwood kept control. There had been others, too. The Hispanic man who'd complained about harassment, only to find himself arrested on an old warrant. The Asian woman who'd been pulled over 12 times in a month until she stopped, driving through Pinewood altogether. The system worked. It filled the jail cells, paid the bills through fines and forfeitures, and kept certain people out of their town. Most importantly, it kept Blackwood and his chosen officers in power. Until today, a knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Lieutenant Parker entered without waiting for a response. "Chief, we've got trouble," he said, ignoring Dunn and Rollins. "The mayor's called an emergency town council meeting, and there's a Justice Department official on the phone. They're asking about our arrest records." Blackwood's face darkened. "Tell them the system is down for maintenance. We need time." "There's more," Parker continued. "The general's wife, she's some big-shot civil rights lawyer. She's already filed for an emergency injunction to preserve all our records and communications." For the first time, Blackwood felt a flutter of real fear. This wasn't following the usual script. "Get out," he told Dunn and Rollins, "and keep your mouths shut. Not a word to anyone." After they left, Blackwood turned to Parker. "How bad is it?" Parker closed the door and lowered his voice. "If they get access to the real numbers, the special accounts, everything we've built..." He didn't need to finish. Both men knew what was at stake. Blackwood moved to his computer and began typing rapidly. "Delete everything on the shared drive. Use the secure wipe. I'll handle the backup server." "What about the paper records?" Parker asked. "Accident," Blackwood replied grimly. "A pipe burst in the records room. Very unfortunate timing." As Parker hurried out, Blackwood opened his bottom desk drawer and pulled out a bottle of whiskey. He poured himself a generous glass and drank it in one gulp. Outside, the chants of protesters grew louder. On his computer screen, an email notification appeared from the mayor's office, followed by another from the governor. His phone rang again, the Pentagon calling back. Blackwood ignored them all as he systematically began erasing the evidence of years of corruption and racial profiling. What he didn't know was that it was already too late. 4 minutes after General Crumble, Webb had been slapped. The empire had indeed begun to crumble. And nothing Blackwood did now could stop what was coming. By midnight, Zara's video had been viewed 20 million times. Every major news network was running the story. Army General assaulted by police officer. Hashtags like "Hard on Justice for General" and "Bonner's Pinewood Shame" were trending worldwide. What had started as a local incident in a small town had exploded into a national conversation. In the Webb household, the phones wouldn't stop ringing. "That was CNN," Nadine said, hanging up the kitchen phone. "They want you on tomorrow morning." General Webb nodded, looking through the stack of messages his family had been taking all evening. Calls from fellow officers, senators, civil rights, leaders, and even the White House. "Dad, look at this," Elijah called from the living room where he was monitoring social media. People are organizing protests in 30 different cities. They're calling it Stand with the General Day. Weber walked over to look at his son's laptop. The screen showed photos of people gathering with signs, many wearing military-style clothing in solidarity. Veterans groups were particularly vocal, outraged at the treatment of a decorated officer. "This is bigger than us now," Webb said quietly. Zara, who had been analyzing the online response, looked up from her own computer. "It's the timing, Dad. People have been angry about police brutality for years. Your case just put a face on it that's harder for some people to ignore." "A general's face," Nadine added, joining them. "With 30 years of service and medals. To show for it?" Webb touched his cheek, which had developed a visible bruise. If this is what happens to a man in uniform with stars on his shoulders, he didn't need to finish. They all understood what it meant for people without his rank and recognition. At the governor's mansion, an emergency meeting was in progress. "This is a disaster," Governor Sheridan paced the room, her aides watching nervously. "I've got the president asking questions. The Pentagon is demanding answers, and the footage is absolutely damning." Her chief of staff nodded. "The polls are already showing a significant drop in your approval ratings. People want action." "I've called General Webb personally," the governor said. "But that's not enough. We need to show we're taking this seriously." "The police union is pushing back," an aide warned. "They're saying we shouldn't rush to judgment." Governor Sheridan stopped pacing. "Did they watch the same video I did? There's no defense for what happened." She turned to her press secretary. "Draft a statement. We're appointing a special investigator to look into the Pinewood Police Department. And get me everything you can on Chief Blackwood. I want to know if there's a pattern here." Outside the Pinewood Police Department, the crowd of protesters had grown to hundreds despite the late hour. They carried signs and chanted for justice. Among them was Elijah Webb, who had slipped out after his parents went to bed. "This is amazing," he told his friend Jamal, looking around at the diverse crowd. "White, black, Latino, Asian, everyone's here." "It's because of your dad," Jamal replied. "Nobody can say he didn't comply, or that he was a troublemaker. They picked the wrong man to mess with." Across the street, Officer Rawlins watched the protesters from his car. He was supposed to be heading home after his shift, but something kept him there, watching. One protester's sign caught his eye. "If they'll do this to a general, what will they do to me?" The question had been haunting him all day. In Washington, D.C., the Pentagon's Public Affairs Office was working through the night. General Harriet Palmer, Webb's commanding officer, had issued a strongly worded statement. The United States military stands behind General Marcus Webb, a decorated officer who has served this country with distinction for 30 years. The treatment he received today is unacceptable and does not reflect the values for which he has risked his life defending. We expect a full investigation and appropriate consequences. Military personnel across the country had been sharing their own stories of racial profiling by police, creating a flood of first-hand accounts that could no longer be ignored. Back in Pinewood, Chief Blackwood finally left the station at 3 a.m., having deleted what he could. As he drove home, his police radio crackled with reports of the continuing protests. His phone buzzed with a text from the mayor. "Emergency town hall tomorrow. Mandatory attendance," Blackwood cursed under his breath. This wasn't going away. At 6 a.m., exactly 24 hours after the incident, Nadine Webb sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, combing through police records she'd accessed through legal channels. Her trained eye had spotted something the department had failed to hide. "Marcus," she called to her husband, who was preparing for a day of interviews. "Look at these numbers!" Webb joined her at the table as she pointed to her laptop screen. "See this pattern? 80% of traffic stops in Pinewood involve minority drivers, in a town that's only 15% minority. And look at these fines. They're 3 times higher for Black and Latino drivers than for white ones." Afrique studied the data. "They've been funding their department on the backs of minorities." "It's not just unfair," Nadine said, her lawyer's mind already building a case. "It's unconstitutional. And look here, they've been using these fines to fill the county jail with people who can't pay, creating modern-day debtors' prisons," Webb said grimly. Nadine nodded. "Exactly. And there's more. Chief Blackwood has been in charge for 15 years. In that time, there have been 27 formal complaints of excessive force against his officers. Guess how many resulted in discipline?" "0, Webb guessed. "Not a single one," Nadine confirmed. "The slap you received wasn't an isolated incident, Marcus. It was business as usual." Webb's phone rang. It was his contact at the Justice Department. "They're sending investigators to Pinewood today," he told Nadine after the call, "with authority to access all records and interview all officers." Nadine smiled. "I hope they hurry. I have a feeling Blackwood is trying to clean house as we speak." "Too late," Webb said, the hint of a smile touching his lips. "The empire is already crumbling." At the Pentagon, General Harriet Palmer strode down the long hallway with purpose in every step. At 62, she was one of the highest-ranking women in the military, with silver hair cut in a no-nonsense style and a reputation for protecting her people. Today, one of her best officers needed that protection. She entered the conference room, where 5 other military leaders were already waiting, all in full-dress uniform. "Gentlemen," she said, taking her seat at the head of the table. "I assume you've all seen the video." Grim nods answered her. On the wall screen, a still image from Zara's video showed General Webb with Officer Dunn's hand connecting with his face. "Marcus Webb is one of the finest officers I've ever served with," General Palmer continued. 3 tours in combat zones, Bronze Star with Valor, Distinguished Service Cross, and yesterday he was handcuffed on the side of the road like a common criminal. "The public response has been unprecedented," said Colonel James Rodriguez, head of military public affairs. "We've received over 10,000 messages from current and former service members. Many are sharing their own experiences with police profiling." General Palmer nodded. "This isn't just about Marcus. It's about every soldier who takes off their uniform and suddenly becomes a target because of their skin color." "What's our official position?" asked General Thompson, the oldest officer present. "Our position," Palmer replied firmly, "is that we stand behind General Webb completely. And we're going to make that crystal clear." By noon, military stands with Webb was trending on social media. Photos flooded the internet of service members in uniform holding signs of support. Veterans organizations issued statements condemning the Pinewood Police Department. Webb's phone rang again as he was preparing for a television interview. It was his former commanding officer from his first deployment. "Marcus," said the familiar voice. "The boys from Alpha Company are organizing a motorcycle ride to Pinewood. 500 strong. Just say the word." Webb smiled but shook his head. "Tell them I appreciate it, but we need to do this the right way. Through the system." "The system that let this happen in the first place?" his old commander asked. "The very same," Webb replied. "Because when we fix it properly, it won't just be for me." After hanging up, Webb checked his messages. There were dozens from soldiers he'd commanded over the years, each offering support and sharing outrage. One message particularly touched him. It was from a young private who had served under him in his last deployment. "Sir, when I joined the Army, I was just a kid from the projects. You taught me that the uniform means something, that we deserve respect because we earn it every day. What happened to you isn't right, and we all know it. Every soldier stands with you, sir." Webb had to take a moment to compose himself before his interview. In Washington, Senator Eleanor Hayes called an emergency committee meeting. "General Webb is from my state," she told her colleagues. "This incident highlights a problem we can no longer ignore. When a three-star general can be profiled and assaulted by police, what chance does an ordinary citizen have?" The committee voted to send an official delegation to Pinewood. The Pentagon, not to be outdone, announced they were sending their own representatives. Back in Pinewood, Chief Blackwood received the news with growing alarm. "Pentagon officials?" he repeated, staring at Lieutenant Parker. "Coming here?" Parker nodded grimly. "Tomorrow morning. And that's not all. The senator's office called. They're sending a delegation, too." Blackwood slumped in his chair. This was supposed to blow over. "There's more," Parker said, looking uncomfortable. "The military community is rallying around Webb. There's talk of a veteran's motorcycle ride to town. Hundreds of them." For the first time, genuine fear showed on Blackwood's face. His department of 30 officers suddenly seemed very small. At the Webb home, the family gathered for dinner despite the constant interruptions of phone calls and visitors. The Pentagon called again, Webb told his family as he finally sat down to eat. "General Palmer is personally coming tomorrow." "Harriet Palmer?" Nadine asked, impressed. "She doesn't leave the Pentagon for just anyone." "She also said something interesting," Webb continued. "Apparently, Pinewood isn't the only department with these issues. There are similar patterns in towns across 3 states. Zara looked up from her plate. "Like it's coordinated?" Webb nodded slowly. "That's what they're starting to think. And they're very interested in Chief Blackwood's background and connections." "So, this is bigger than just one bad cop," Elijah said. "Much bigger," Webb agreed. "It's a system, and systems can be dismantled." Outside their home, news vans remained parked, waiting for updates. Supporters had left flowers and thank-you notes on their lawn. The world was watching now. The empire wasn't just crumbling. It was being torn down brick by brick, and the whole country was helping. Officer Kevin Rawlins couldn't sleep. It was 2 a.m., and he sat at his kitchen table staring at his police badge. His wife Laura had gone to bed hours ago, after another argument about the incident. "You were there," she had said. "You saw what Dunn did. Why didn't you stop him?" Rawlins had no good answer. He picked up his phone and watched Zara's video again, seeing himself standing by as Dunn slapped General Webb. The shame burned in his chest. He looked at the family photos on his wall. His wedding day. The birth of his daughter, now 5 years old. His police academy graduation, where he had sworn to protect and serve. What had happened to that young officer with big dreams? Rawlins thought back to his first days on the Pinewood police force. He had joined to make a difference, to help people. Then came the training from Chief Blackwood and the senior officers. "This is how we keep order in Pinewood," Blackwood had told him during his first week. "These are our streets. We decide who belongs here." At first, Rawlins had told himself it was about safety, about keeping the town peaceful. But over time, he saw the pattern. The unnecessary traffic stops, the higher fines for certain drivers, the way some complaints mysteriously disappeared. He remembered a traffic stop last year. A black woman with her young son in the car. She had been polite, but Dunn had been aggressive anyway. Rollins had said nothing then, too. "What kind of example am I setting for my daughter?" he whispered to the empty kitchen. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jenkins, the youngest officer on the force. "You watching the news? Pentagon? Sending people tomorrow. Chief deleted a bunch of files today. What are we going to do?" Rollins didn't reply. Instead, he opened his laptop and started typing. Everything he had seen. Every order from Blackwood. Every time Dunn had crossed the line. Every complaint that had been buried. When he finished, it was nearly 4 a.m. He saved the document and closed his laptop. Laura found him still at the kitchen table when she woke up for work. "Kevin," she said, concerned by the dark circles under his eyes. "Did you sleep at all?" "I know what I have to do," he told her. She sat beside him and took his hand. "It's going to be hard." "I took an oath," Rollins said, "and I've been breaking it every day. I stayed silent." Laura squeezed his hand. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." After Laura left for her nursing shift, Rollins got dressed. Not in his uniform, but in civilian clothes. He drove slowly through town, passing the police station where protesters still gathered. Signs called for justice, for accountability. He drove on until he reached the Webb house. News vans were parked outside, reporters drinking coffee as they waited for updates. Rollins parked his car and took a deep breath. What he was about to do would end his career in Pinewood. Chief Blackwood would make sure of that. But for the first time in years, he felt like he might be able to look at himself in the mirror again. He approached the house, ignoring the reporters who quickly noticed his arrival. The questions started immediately. "Are you from the police department? Do you have a statement? Has Chief Blackwood sent you?" Rollins said nothing as he walked to the front door and rang the bell. It was Elijah who answered, his young face hardening when he recognized the officer. "What do you want?" he demanded. "I'd like to speak with your father," Rollins said quietly. "Why should I let you anywhere near him?" Elijah blocked the doorway. "I understand," Rollins said, "but I have information that might help your family." Before Elijah could respond, General Webb appeared behind him. "It's all right, Elijah," Webb said, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. He studied Rollins for a moment. "Officer Rollins, isn't it? The one who stood by?" Rollins nodded, the shame evident on his face. "Yes, sir. That's why I'm here." Webb considered him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, the entire family watched with cautious expressions as Rollins sat across from Webb in the living room. "I came to apologize," Rollins began. "What happened to you was wrong. I should have stopped it." "Yes, you should have," Webb agreed, his tone even. "I know it's not enough," Rollins continued, "but I want to help make it right." He placed his laptop on the coffee table. "Everything I know about the department is in here. The system chief, Blackwood built, the officers involved, the pattern of targeting minorities." Nadine moved forward, her attorney's interest piqued. "Why now?" Webb asked. "Why not before it was your career on the line?" Rollins looked down. "I have a daughter. Last night, I realized I couldn't look her in the eye and teach her to do the right thing when I've been a coward." A silence fell over the room. Finally, Webb spoke again. "It takes courage to admit you were wrong, Officer Rollins. The question is, what will you do next?" Rollins met his gaze. "Whatever it takes to fix this, even if it means testifying against my fellow officers." For the first time since entering, Rollins saw Webb's expression soften slightly. "Then perhaps there's hope for Pinewood after all," the general said. Nadine Webb spread the documents across the dining room table while Zara connected Officer Rawlins' laptop to their printer. General Webb watched from the doorway as the two women worked, methodically sorting through years of police department secrets. "This is unbelievable," Nadine muttered, scanning a spreadsheet. They actually had quotas for how many minority drivers to stop each month. Rawlins, who sat uncomfortably in a chair near the window, nodded. Chief Blackwood called it proactive policing, but it was just an excuse to target certain people. Zara looked up from the laptop. "Did you know about all of this when you joined?" "Not at first," Rawlins admitted. "They ease you into it. First, they tell you to watch for certain cars in certain neighborhoods. Then they start talking about statistics and known offenders. Before you know it, you're pulling people over because of how they look, not what they did." "And the money?" Nadine asked, pointing to another document. "That's how they justify it to the town council," Rawlins explained. "Pinewood's budget depends on ticket revenue and court fees. Last year, they collected over $2 million in fines." Elijah, who had been listening from the kitchen, walked in with a disgusted look. "So they turned racism into a business." "A very profitable one," Nadine agreed, her lawyer's mind already cataloging violations. "This is enough for a class action lawsuit that could bankrupt the town." General Webb finally spoke. "But we need more than what Officer Rawlins has provided. We need access to the official records." "Blackwood's been deleting files since this happened," Rawlins said. "But he can't erase everything. There are backups on the department's secure server. If we could access those—" "Can you get us in?" Webb asked. Rawlins hesitated. "I don't have that level of clearance. Only Blackwood and Lieutenant Parker can access the main server." Zara had been quiet, studying the laptop's contents. Now she looked up with a gleam in her eye that her family knew well. "Maybe we don't need their clearance," she said. An hour later, the dining room had been transformed into an operations center. Zara sat at her computer, fingers flying over the keyboard, while Rawlins provided information about the police department's network. "Every officer has a basic login for the department system," he explained, "but the secure server where they keep the sensitive files is behind another firewall." "What about remote access?" Zara asked. "Does Blackwood ever work from home?" Rawlins nodded. "He has a special connection. Even during COVID, when everyone else had to come in, he could access everything from his house." "That's our way in," Zara said, excitement in her voice. "Every remote connection has vulnerabilities." Nadine looked concerned. "Zara, we need to be careful about how we obtain evidence. If it's not legally obtained—" "I'm not hacking anything, Mom," Zara assured her. "I'm just going to find a legitimate way to access public records that should be available through proper channels." General Webb suppressed a smile at his daughter's careful phrasing. "What do you need from me?" Rawlins asked. "Your login credentials," Zara replied, "and everything you know about how their system is set up." As Rawlins and Zara worked on the technical approach, Nadine received a call from a former colleague now working at the Justice Department. "Maria, thanks for calling back," she said, stepping into the next room. "Yes, it's about Pinewood." "Exactly. Listen, we have reason to believe they're destroying evidence." "Yes, we can document a pattern going back at least 3 years." When she returned, her expression was determined. "Justice Department is sending people first thing tomorrow. But if Blackwood is deleting files tonight, we're working on it," Zara said, not looking up from her screen. At the Pinewood Police Department, Chief Blackwood was indeed working late. The shredder in his office hummed constantly as he fed it document after document. On his computer, a IT progress bar showed the secure deletion program slowly wiping years of incriminating data. Lieutenant Parker entered without knocking, his face tense. "Chief, we have a problem. Jenkins is talking to Internal Affairs," Blackwood cursed. Jenkins was young, impressionable. "What's he telling them?" "Everything, from what I hear. The quotas, the targeting, maybe even the special account." The special account was where they had diverted some of the fine money over the years. Officially, it didn't exist. "Shut him up," Blackwood ordered. Parker hesitated. "There are too many eyes on us right now. If anything happens to Jenkins, I don't care how you do it. Just make sure he understands the consequences of disloyalty." Back at the Webb house, it was past midnight. Elijah had fallen asleep on the IBD couch. Nadine was organizing the printed documents for the Justice Department. General Webb was making coffee to keep everyone alert. "I'm in," Zara suddenly announced. Everyone gathered around her screen. "How did you do it?" Rollins asked, amazed. "Blackwood uses the same password for everything," Zara explained, including his personal email, which is publicly listed on the town website. Once I had that, I could access his remote connection to the department server. "Is this legal?" Elijah asked groggily from the couch. "We're accessing public records, using credentials voluntarily provided by Officer Rollins as part of an official investigation," Nadine stated carefully. "Now, what do we have?" Zara navigated through folders of files. "It looks like he's deleted a lot already, but the server keeps automatic backups. Here's one from last week." As she opened the backup, folders appeared containing years of records. Traffic stops categorized by race. Internal complaints that never made it to official channels. Officer evaluations rewarding those with the highest number of minority arrests. "Look at this," Nadine said, pointing to a spreadsheet. "They've been tracking every black family that moves into Pinewood, then targeting them for citations until they leave." "And here," Rollins added, pointing to another file, "the Special Projects Fund. Money from fines that never made it to the town budget." General Webb studied the screen. "Download everything. We need to get this to the Justice Department before Blackwood realizes we have access." As Zara worked to transfer the files, Webb's phone rang. It was his contact in Washington. "Marcus, we've been looking into Blackwood's background," the voice said. "He's connected to some concerning groups. 3 other police chiefs in neighboring states share similar backgrounds. We think this may be a coordinated effort." "To do what?" Webb asked. "To systematically push minorities out of certain towns. To create what they call safe zones. The pattern is identical in all 4 locations." After hanging up, Webb shared the information with the others. "This isn't just about Pinewood," he concluded. "This is happening in towns across the country." "Done," Zara announced as the last file transferred. "We have everything." Rollins looked at the collection of evidence with mixed emotions. "This will destroy the department." "No," Webb corrected him. "This will rebuild it. Properly, this time." Just then, Nadine's phone buzzed with a news alert. She read it with widening eyes. "Officer Jenkins was just admitted to the hospital," she said. "Apparent hit and run outside the police station. He was scheduled to talk to Internal Affairs tomorrow." "Blackwood," Rollins said grimly, "this is how he silences people." "Not anymore," Webb said, his voice firm. "Zara, send everything to my contacts at the Justice Department and the Pentagon. Now. Nadine, call Maria back and tell her about Jenkins. Rollins, I think it's time you stayed somewhere safer than your house." As they mobilized, Webb felt a grim determination. The Empire wasn't just crumbling now, it was being exposed for what it truly was. And in its place, something better could be built. "Tomorrow is the town hall meeting," he reminded everyone. "That's when we bring everything into the light." The fee. Pinewood Community Center had never been so full. By 6 o'clock, every seat was taken, and people lined the walls. News vans crowded the parking lot. Satellite dishes pointed skyward. What would normally have been a routine town meeting had become national news. Mayor Helen Garcia, a nervous woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, tapped the microphone. "Order, please," she called over the buzz of conversation. "We need to begin." The crowd slowly quieted. At the front of the room, a table had been set up for town officials. Chief Blackwood sat stiffly in his dress uniform, his face a careful mask. Beside him, Lieutenant Parker stared straight ahead. Other officers, including Dunn, were scattered throughout the room. Officer Rawlins was noticeably absent. In the third row, General Webb sat with his family. He wore his full-dress uniform, medals gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The bruise on his face had darkened, standing out against his dignified appearance. Mayor Garcia cleared her throat. "We've called this emergency meeting to address recent events involving the Pinewood Police Department. Chief Blackwood will make a statement, followed by public comments." Blackwood approached the microphone with practiced confidence. "Citizens of Pinewood, I understand there are concerns about an incident involving one of our officers. I want to assure you that we take all allegations seriously. Officer Dunn has been suspended pending a full internal investigation." Murmurs ran through the crowd. "We have always strived to serve and protect all citizens equally," Blackwood continued. "This isolated incident does not represent the values of our department." "Isolated?" a voice called from the back. "Like what happened to my son last year." All heads turned to see Mrs. Johnson, an elderly black woman, standing with dignity. "My boy was beaten during a traffic stop. When we filed a complaint, nothing happened." "Was that isolated too?" Before Blackwood could respond, another voice spoke up. "My family was ticketed 8 times in 1 month after we moved here," said Mr. Ramirez, a Latino man near the front. "We finally moved away because we couldn't afford the fines. Was that isolated?" More voices joined in, sharing similar stories. The mayor looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Please," she said, "one at a time. We have a sign-up sheet for comments." "We've been signing up to speak for years," a young black woman interrupted. Nobody's been listening." The meeting was quickly spiraling out of control. People shouted over one another, years of frustration pouring out. Blackwood's face darkened as he returned to his seat. Officer Dunn stood up from his place in the crowd. "This is ridiculous. We're protecting this town. If people would just follow the law, like General Webb did," someone shouted back. "He followed every instruction and still got slapped." Dunn's face flushed red. "That was a misunderstanding." "We all saw the video," multiple voices responded. Mayor Garcia banged her gavel desperately. "Please, we need order." From his seat, General Webb watched the chaos unfold. This was the release of years of pent-up anger and pain. But nothing would be solved by shouting. He caught the mayor's eye and gave a small nod. She looked relieved. "Perhaps," she said into the microphone, "we should hear from General Webb." A hush fell over the room as Webb stood and walked to the microphone. His presence commanded instant respect. "Good evening," he began, his deep voice calm. 4 days ago, I was driving home from my daughter's college graduation when I was pulled over, insulted, assaulted, and handcuffed on the side of the road. The room was completely silent now. But my story is not unique," Webb continued. "The only difference is that my daughter recorded it, and my rank made people pay attention." He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of those who had shared their stories. "What happened to me happens to people without cameras, without medals, without a voice, every single day, in this town. And not just in Pinewood. Webb turned to face Blackwood directly. This isn't about one bad officer or one bad day. This is about a system designed to target certain citizens, to generate revenue from their suffering, and to push them out of the community. Blackwood half rose from his chair. That's a serious accusation. With serious evidence, Webb cut him off. Evidence that has already been delivered to the Justice Department. A sound of surprise ran through the room. Blackwood's face went pale. Traffic stops targeting minorities at 4 times the rate of white drivers. Webb listed calmly. Fines that are consistently higher for Black and Latino residents. A quota system for officers. And a special account where some of that money disappeared. Mayor Garcia looked shocked. What special account? Before Blackwood could respond, the AOAB back doors of the community center opened. A group of men and women in suits entered, led by a stern-faced woman. "Federal agents," someone whispered, and the whisper spread through the crowd. Officer Rawlins appeared behind them, accompanied by 2 more agents. The woman in charge approached the microphone. Webb stepped aside for her. "I'm Special Agent Diana." "Chen, Department of Justice," she announced. "We are here to serve warrants on Chief Warren Blackwood and Lieutenant James Parker for civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and financial fraud." Gasps and exclamations filled the room. Blackwood jumped to his feet. "This is outrageous. You have no jurisdiction." "Federal civil rights violations give us plenty of jurisdiction," Agent Chen replied coolly. "And Officer Jenkins's statement from his hospital bed this morning gives us probable cause." As agents moved toward Blackwood and Parker, Dunn suddenly stood up. "This is all a setup. You're going to believe them over us. We're the ones keeping this town safe." An older white woman in the front row turned to him. "Safe for who, Officer Dunn? Not for my Black neighbors. Not for the Latino family that was driven out last year. Not for the Muslim doctor who left his practice because he was pulled over every day." Dunn had no answer. General Webb watched as agents handcuffed Blackwood and Parker. Other officers in the room looked stunned, uncertain what to do. Officer Rawlins moved to stand beside Webb. "I've given my full statement," he said quietly. "Everything I know about the department." "Was it worth it?" Webb asked. Rawlins looked around at the community finally having its moment of truth. "Yes, sir." "It was." Mayor Garcia, looking shell-shocked, tapped the microphone again. "In light of these developments, I'm proposing an emergency town council session to establish a civilian oversight committee for our police department." From somewhere in the crowd, a voice called out, "And who's going to lead it?" All eyes turned to General Webb. Webb felt the weight of their expectation. "This isn't about me," he began. "But it could be about all of us," came a voice. Mrs. Johnson had stood again. "We need someone who understands leadership, who knows right from wrong, someone both sides respect." Webb looked at his family. Nadine nodded encouragingly. Zara and Elijah both gave him thumbs up. "I would be honored to help," Webb said finally, "but only if the committee represents every part of this community." As the meeting continued with new energy and purpose, federal agents escorted Blackwood and Parker out the back door. The empire had not just crumbled, it had been replaced in a single evening with the beginnings of something better. The Pinewood Police Department looked different with Justice Department agents at every desk. Files that had been hidden for years now sat in neat evidence boxes. Officers who had once strutted confidently through the halls now walked with their eyes down, avoiding the investigators' gazes. Agent Diana Chen had converted the chief's office into her command center. The walls were covered with photos and timelines connecting officers to incidents. On Blackwood's former desk sat stacks of citizen complaints that had previously been buried. "Officer Miller," she called to a nervous-looking policeman waiting outside. "You're next." Inside the office, Chen gestured to a chair across from her. A recording device sat between them. "This is an official interview regarding departmental practices under Chief Blackwood," she explained. "Everything you say is being recorded." Officer Miller, a 20-year veteran, shifted uncomfortably. "I want a lawyer." "That's your right," Chen replied evenly. "But officers who cooperate voluntarily are being considered differently than those who don't." Miller glanced at the wall where photos showed him at traffic stops with minority drivers. "I was just following orders," he said, quietly. "We've heard that before," Chen noted. "Tell me about the quota system." In a cell at the Federal Detention Center, Chief Blackwood sat alone. His uniform had been replaced with an orange jumpsuit. His badge, gun, and tie were gone. A guard approached. "Your lawyer's here." In the visitation room, a stern-faced woman in a suit waited. "They've seized everything," Blackwood said without greeting her. "Files, servers, my home computer." "Did you delete the backup files like I told you?" the lawyer asked. "I tried, but they got to them first," Blackwood admitted. "Someone inside helped them." The lawyer's expression hardened. "Rollins?" Blackwood nodded. "He went to Webb's house the day after it happened." "What about the others?" "They're talking. Everyone's trying to save themselves." The lawyer gathered her papers. "Then we need to make a deal before they do." "A deal?" Blackwood looked horrified. "What about loyalty? What about the plan?" "The plan is over, Warren," she said coldly. "Now it's about damage control." At the Webb home, Rollins sat with General Webb reviewing officer files. These 5 were directly involved in the targeting program, Rollins explained, pointing to photos. They knew exactly what they were doing. These others just went along with it. Webb studied the faces. "And done?" "The worst of them," Rollins said grimly. "He has 28 complaints of excessive force against minorities. Blackwood buried them all." The doorbell rang. Nadine answered it to find Agent Chen on their doorstep. "Mrs. Webb," Chen greeted her. "I need to speak with your husband and Officer Rollins." In the living room, Chen didn't waste time. "Blackwood is talking," she announced. "He's offered to give names in exchange for a reduced sentence." "Names of who?" Webb asked. "Other police chiefs, town officials, members of what he calls the network." Chen leaned forward. "This is bigger than Pinewood. We've found similar patterns in 12 different towns across 4 states." Rollins looked stunned. "I knew about some connections to other departments, but 12 towns? All with the same system," Chen confirmed. "Target minorities with excessive fines and enforcement. Use the money to fund the police. Drive certain populations out to create what they call ideal communities." "Ethnic cleansing through policing," Nadine said, her lawyer's mind quickly grasping the implications. Chen nodded. "Exactly." Officer Dunn wasn't cooperating. Unlike the others who were scrambling to make deals, he remained defiant in his interview. "I did my job," he insisted to the frustrated investigator. "The problem isn't with us. It's with them." "Them?" the investigator repeated. "You know who I mean," Dunn said with a sneer. "They don't belong here." The investigator made a note. "For the record, Officer Dunn is expressing explicitly racist views." "Call it what you want," Dunn replied. "Blackwood understood. We all did. That's why Pinewood was such a good place to live." His interview recording would eventually be played in court, sealing his fate. By week's end, the Justice Department had interviewed every officer in the department. Some broke down crying, admitting everything. Others tried to minimize their involvement. A few, like Dunn, remained defiantly proud of what they'd done. The evidence was overwhelming. Years of systematic discrimination documented in files, emails, text messages, and now officer testimonies. What had begun with a slap had exposed an entire network of corruption. Agent Chen met with General Webb to share the preliminary findings. "We're charging 14 officers, including Blackwood and Dunn," she explained. 7 others will receive disciplinary actions but no criminal charges. And 3, including Rollins, are being treated as cooperating witnesses. "What happens to the department now?" Webb asked. "Complete restructuring under federal oversight," Chen replied. "New leadership, new training, new policies. The Justice Department will remain involved for at least 5 years." Webb nodded thoughtfully. "And the other towns in the network?" "We've launched investigations in all of them. Blackwood's testimony has been illuminating." As Agent Chen prepared to leave, she hesitated at the door. "The Pentagon has asked me to tell you they'd like your help with creating new training programs, not just for Pinewood, but for police departments nationwide." Webb raised an eyebrow. "They want a military approach to policing?" "No," Chen clarified. "They want your approach to leadership. Dignity, respect, and accountability." As she drove away, Webb stood on his porch thinking about how far things had come in just 1 week. The slap that had bruised his face had ultimately revealed a wound much deeper in American society, a wound that could now, finally, begin to heal. 2 weeks after the town hall meeting, Pinewood felt like a different place. Yellow crime scene tape no longer surrounded the police station. Instead, colorful banners announced a community gathering in the park. People who had once avoided each other now worked side by side, setting up tables and chairs. Mrs. Johnson, who had spoken up at the town hall, directed volunteers with the energy of someone half her age. "The tent goes over there," she called to a group of teenagers. "We need shade for the elders." Among the volunteers was Officer Rollins, no longer in uniform, but still recognized by everyone. Some people kept their distance, memories still fresh. Others had begun to cautiously accept his presence as he worked to make amends. "Need help with that?" he asked Mr. Ramirez, who was struggling with a heavy cooler. There was a moment of hesitation before Mr. Ramirez nodded. "Thanks." It was a small step, but an important one. At the Webb house, the family prepared to attend the gathering. Zara was home from her new job in Washington, where she'd been hired by a civil rights organization to help analyze policing data across the country. "Dad, the interview you did is trending again," she said, checking her phone. "Over 20 million views." Webb straightened his tie. He wasn't wearing his uniform today. This was about being a member of the community, not a general. "Your speech about creating a new kind of police department really connected with people," Nadine added, joining them. "I've received calls from 5 other towns asking for help with setting up civilian oversight committees." Elijah, who had become a leader among Pinewood's young people, looked up from the poster he was making. "My Justice Club at school has 30 members now. Even some of the white kids whose parents are police officers joined." Webb smiled at his son. "That's real change." The community gathering was unlike anything Pinewood had seen before. Families of all backgrounds shared food, stories, and cautious hope. Children played together while adults who had once eyed each other with suspicion now engaged in conversation. Mayor Garcia, who had survived the political fallout by embracing reform, greeted Webb warmly. "The interim police chief arrives next week," she told him. "She has an excellent record of community-oriented policing." "And the Oversight Committee?" Webb asked. "Approved unanimously by the town council. We need your recommendations for members." By Friday, As they spoke, Webb noticed Officer Jenkins approaching, still walking with a cane from his accident. The young officer had become something of a hero after testifying from his hospital bed. "General Webb," Jenkins greeted him. "I wanted to thank you. If you hadn't stood up, I don't think I would have had the courage." "Sometimes it just takes one person to start the change," Webb replied, shaking his hand. Across the park, Mrs. Johnson had organized an unusual sight. Black and white neighbors sitting together at round tables, sharing meals and stories. "My grandson was afraid to drive through Pinewood," one elderly black woman explained to her white neighbor. "He would go 20 miles out of his way just to avoid it." The white woman looked shocked. "I had no idea. My son is a new driver too, but he's never worried about being pulled over." "That's what we call privilege," Mrs. Johnson interjected gently. "Not your fault, but important to understand." The conversation continued, uncomfortable at times, but necessary. Elijah and his friends had set up a booth where young people could register for what they called dialogue days. The program paired teens from different backgrounds for conversations about their experiences. "My dad gave me the idea," Elijah explained to a reporter who was covering the event. "He said we need to understand each other's lives before we can fix the system." Nearby, Zara was demonstrating her data visualization project, showing clearly how traffic stops had targeted certain neighborhoods. "When people see the patterns in the data, they can't deny what was happening," she explained. "Numbers tell the truth when words fail." As evening approached, the gathering turned into an impromptu town meeting. People stood to share their hopes for the new Pinewood. Ideas flowed freely. A citizen app to report and track police interactions, monthly community forums, joint trainings for officers and residents. Webb watched with pride as his neighbors, once divided by fear and suspicion, came together to rebuild their community. The wounds were still fresh, the trust still fragile, but the healing had begun. "This is just the beginning," Nadine said, squeezing his hand as they listened to the passionate discussions. Webb nodded. What had started with a painful slap was transforming into something powerful, a template for change that could spread far beyond Pinewood. 3 months after the slap that changed everything, General Webb sat in the federal courthouse watching as Chief Blackwood stood before the judge. The once powerful man looked small in his civilian clothes, his shoulders hunched as the judge read the charges. "Warren Blackwood, you have pled guilty to civil rights violations, abuse of power, evidence tampering, and financial fraud," the judge stated firmly. "Before I pronounce sentence, do you have anything to say?" Blackwood cleared his throat. "I believed I was protecting my town," he said, his voice lacking its former confidence. "I was wrong." "Yes, you were," the judge replied coldly. "You will serve 8 years in federal prison." As Blackwood was led away, Nadine leaned close to Webb. "He got off easy with that deal," she whispered, "but his testimony helped bring down 11 other police chiefs." Webb nodded. Justice was complicated, rarely perfect. But it was progress. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded the Webb family. "General Webb, are you satisfied with the sentence?" one called out. "Justice isn't about satisfaction," Webb replied thoughtfully. "It's about accountability and change. This is just one step." Later that week, Officer Dunn faced his own day in court. Unlike Blackwood, he had refused any deals, maintaining his innocence to the end. The jury had taken just 2 hours to find him guilty on all counts. 12 years, Nadine told the family over dinner. No possibility of parole for at least 10. "Good," said Elijah firmly. He showed no remorse, even at the end. Zara looked up from her laptop. "Did you see his supporters outside the courthouse?" There were people holding signs saying he was a hero. The family fell silent, reminded that not everyone saw the changes in Pinewood as positive. "That's why the work continues," Webb said finally. "Changing laws is easier than changing hearts." At the newly reformed Pinewood Police Department, interim Chief Rosario Martinez was implementing changes daily. A veteran officer from a large city with a track record of successful community policing, she had arrived with clear goals. "Every officer will undergo new training," she announced at her first meeting. "Body cameras on at all times. Regular community. Feedback sessions. No exceptions, no excuses." Some officers had resigned rather than adapt. Others embraced the changes, including Officer Jenkins, now recovered and serving as community liaison. Officer Rawlins had left the force but remained in Pinewood, working with youth programs and occasionally consulting on the reforms. "Is it enough?" Webb asked Chief Martinez during a meeting of the Civilian Oversight Committee. "These changes look good on paper, but will they hold?" "That's why the oversight is critical," Martinez replied. "My replacement could come in and try to reverse everything. You'll be the safeguard." Webb understood. Real change needed both new systems and vigilant people to protect them. The Webb family gathered in their living room for a serious discussion. A letter had arrived that morning from the Pentagon. "They want me to lead a task force," Webb explained, "developing new training programs for police departments nationwide." "That's amazing, Dad," Zara exclaimed. "It would mean moving to Washington," Webb continued, "leaving Pinewood just as things are starting to change." Nadine took his hand. "The E4 work here will continue. The foundation is built." "But is it strong enough?" Webb wondered aloud. "Sometimes I think we've only scratched the surface." Elijah, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "My history teacher says change happens in waves. The first wave breaks ground, but it's the ones that follow that really reshape the land." Webb smiled at his son's wisdom. "When did you get so philosophical?" "I had a good teacher," Elijah replied, grinning at his father. That evening, Webb walked through Pinewood alone, thinking about the decision ahead. He passed the police station, now displaying a banner announcing an upcoming community open house. Officers chatted with citizens on the sidewalk without the tension that had once defined such interactions. At the park, the dialogue groups Elijah had helped organize were meeting, circles of teenagers from different backgrounds listening to each other's stories. Webb sat on a bench, watching as the sun set over his changing town. A woman sat down beside him, Mrs. Johnson, who had been one of the first to speak up at the town hall. "You're thinking of leaving," she said. "Not a question, but a statement." "How did you know?" Webb asked, surprised. "I recognize the look of someone weighing their next battle," she replied. "My husband had that same look before each of his deployments." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "Whatever you decide," Mrs. Johnson said finally, "remember that ripples travel far, beyond the stone that creates them." Webb nodded, understanding. The slap had created ripples that were still spreading. The question was, where should he be to guide them? 6 months after the slap, General Marcus Webb stood in full-dress uniform in the East Room of the White House. Before him, the President of the United States held a special commendation. For exceptional service to the nation in advancing civil rights and police accountability, the President read, "We present this commendation to General Marcus Webb." Cameras flashed as Webb accepted the award. In the front row, his family watched, with pride. Nadine elegant in a blue dress, Zara recording everything on her phone, and Elijah standing tall like his father. After the ceremony, well-wishers surrounded them. Cabinet members, senators, civil rights leaders, and fellow military officers All wanted to shake Webb's hand. What had begun as a traffic stop in a small town had sparked a national conversation about policing and race. "General Webb," a voice said quietly at his elbow. A serious-looking man in a dark suit leaned close. "The Secretary of Defense would like a word." Privately, Webb excused himself and followed the man down a long hallway to a secure room where 3 people waited: the Secretary of Defense, the Director of National Intelligence, and Agent Chen from the Justice Department. "Please, sit down, General." The Secretary gestured to an empty chair. "What we're about to share is classified." Webb felt a shift in the atmosphere. This wasn't about the commendation. "First, let me congratulate you," the Secretary began. "The police reform initiatives you've helped develop are being implemented in 37 cities already." "Thank you, sir," Webb replied, waiting for the real purpose of this meeting. TT, Director of National Intelligence, opened a laptop. "General Webb, you're familiar with the network of police departments that Agent Chen's investigation uncovered, correct?" Webb nodded. 12 departments across 4 states, all using the same targeting tactics. "It's actually 26 departments now," Agent Chen corrected. "Blackwood's testimony led us to more connections." "But that's not why we called you." "Here," the Secretary continued, "what you helped uncover goes far beyond corrupt policing." The Director turned the laptop to show Webb a complex diagram of connections between police departments, private security firms, online groups, and several names Webb didn't recognize. Chief Blackwood wasn't just running a racist police department, the Director explained. He was part of a larger network with more dangerous intentions. Webb studied the diagram. What kind of intentions? The 3 officials exchanged glances before Agent Chen spoke. "Domestic terrorism." The room fell silent as Webb absorbed this. "The network Blackwood belonged to calls itself the Guardians," she continued. "They've infiltrated law enforcement across multiple states with a long-term plan. First, drive minorities out of certain communities using targeted policing. Second, establish control of local governments through fear and selective enforcement. And finally, coordinate attacks on what they consider enemy targets." "What targets?" Webb asked, though he suspected the answer. "Government buildings, civil rights organizations, places of worship for non-Christian religions, community centers in predominantly minority neighborhoods," the Secretary listed grimly. They had plans for synchronized attacks in 7 major cities. Webb felt cold. How close were they? 6 months away, the Director replied. "When you were slapped, they were in the final planning stages." "Weapons had been stockpiled," Agent Chen added. "Routes mapped, targets shriveled." Webb thought of Officer Dunn, his hatred so open and raw. Of Chief Blackwood, building his little empire of fear. They had been part of something far darker than he had imagined. When you exposed Pinewood's department, it created a panic in their network, the Secretary explained. Members began destroying evidence, cutting ties, turning on each other. "We moved in while they were scrambling," Agent Chen said. "Your actions gave us the opening we needed." Webb thought back to that moment on the side of the road, the sting of Dunn's hand across his face. Had that slap inadvertently prevented mass tragedy? "We've arrested 43 members of the network so far," the Director continued. "Seized over 200 illegal weapons, found manifests, plans, communications." "Why are you telling me this now?" Webb asked. The Secretary leaned forward. "Because we need your help again. The public face of our response has been about police reform. That's crucial work, but underneath, we're fighting a more dangerous battle against extremism within law enforcement. We want you to lead a specialized task force," the Director added. working with both military and civilian agencies to identify and remove these threats. Webb sat back, taking in the full scope of what they were describing. The slap that started. This, Agent Chen said quietly, it did more than expose one corrupt department. It may have saved countless lives. Later, as Webb rejoined his family, his mind raced with everything he had learned. They noticed his preoccupation immediately. "Dad, what's wrong?" Zara asked. Webb forced a smile. "Nothing. Just some additional responsibilities they want me to consider." As they drove home, Webb watched his family chatting excitedly about the ceremony. They had no idea that their fight for justice in Pinewood had unraveled something far more sinister, that their actions had potentially averted tragedy. On a national scale, the slap that had bruised his cheek had indeed started an empire crumbling. But it wasn't just Blackwood's empire of corrupt policing. It was something far more dangerous, an empire of hatred that had been growing in the shadows, now exposed to the light. Webb made his decision. He would accept the new role. The ripples would continue to spread, and he would help guide them. Because sometimes, standing up against one small injustice could prevent 1,000 larger ones. And sometimes, 4 minutes could change everything. That was the end of this story. Where are you listening from? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more interesting stories like this one. Please share this video with your friends and family to help spread kindness and awareness. Every share makes a difference in creating a world where people stand up against injustice. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.